Once upon a time in Japan, in the midst of the battlefield, Sagara Yashaharu, our protagonist, found himself surrounded by soldiers, while his companion, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who had risked his life to save him, fell victim to a stray bullet. Tragedy hung in the air, but Yashaharu knew he couldn't just stand there idly. Yashaharu was a time traveler, transported 400 years back in time and now immersed in the tumultuous Sengoku era of Japan. This was a crucial moment in history, where every decision and action could change the course of the entire country. With Hideyoshi's departure, Japan's destiny hung by a thread. Yashaharu was determined to act and ensure that events unfolded as they should. However, before he could proceed, he found himself surrounded by threatening samurais. At that moment, a brave girl appeared, saving him from those attackers. Just when it seemed like the danger was dissipating, Yashaharu pulled out his phone to intimidate the samurais. But his device quickly ran out of battery, leaving them vulnerable and at the mercy of their enemies. However, luck was on their side. An army of soldiers arrived to aid Yashaharu and the girl. It turned out that the young noblewoman protecting them was Oda Nobuna, the head of the powerful Nobuna family. After the battle, Yashaharu was taken to the Nobuna family temple, where he was interviewed by Oda. Curious, she asked about that strange device he had used against the samurais. Yashaharu explained that it was a cell phone, but now it was unusable due to lack of charge. Despite mentioning his temporal origin, Oda decided to name him her monkey, not fully believing his story. Meanwhile, in another place, Imagawa Yashimoto, a power-hungry countess, was playing soccer with her servant, Matsudera Motoyasu. They were discussing their failed attempt to defeat Oda Nobuna, where the mysterious monkey had appeared. At that moment, a masked individual named Hanzo arrived to inform them of the new name they had given to the unknown person from the future. Once Yashaharu was brought to his new home, Mitatashi, who would become a prominent spearwoman in the Oda clan in the future, welcomed him. However, before they could engage in a conversation, an old man appeared and a mysterious attacker jumped from the roof, kidnapping Yashaharu. It turned out to be a girl named Hachisuka Gomen, who decided to serve him because her former master, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, died in front of Yashaharu. After talking with Gomen, Yashaharu promised himself to save Japan and help Oda Nobuna conquer it, just as Hideyoshi would have done. Meanwhile, in the lands of Seidu Daosen, the Count of Mino, a meeting was taking place to decide how to handle relations with Oda Nobuna, their direct rival in the conquest of the country. While Oda and her council debated this topic, Yashaharu, to prove that he came from the future, revealed the exact location and time of the next meeting between Oda and Seidu. As a result, Oda and her troops headed to Mino's lands, unaware that Seidu had planned to ambush them. However, Yashaharu anticipated this trap and urged Oda's troops to remain alert. Seeing Oda's soldiers in a defensive position, Seidu's troops decided not to attack, allowing Oda and her troops to reach Mino without issues. Once in Mino, Oda and Seidu met. While Oda dressed elegantly, Seidu opted for a more casual attire. After a conversation, Yashaharu intervened and convinced Seidu that he came from the future. As a result, Seidu decided to ally himself with Oda and cede the province of Mino, recognizing that his time as a ruler was over and that it was Oda's time. At the conclusion of the meeting, Oda acknowledged that this outcome was only possible thanks to Yashaharu's help. On a sunny day, Yashaharu was enjoying his meal when he was interrupted by Katsui, a loyal follower of Oda Nobuna. She was urgently looking for him as their leader. Oda required his immediate presence. Without wasting any time, Yashaharu set off with Katsui. On their way, they encountered a boy named Nobujatsu Oda, Nobuna's younger brother. Once, he would have been the rightful heir to the throne if his sister hadn't been born first. However, Nobujatsu began insulting his sister, unleashing the wrath of Yashaharu. Amidst a heated argument, the young warrior couldn't contain himself and ended up striking Nobujatsu, leading to the brother demanding vengeance by Yashaharu's head. News of this conflict quickly reached Nobuna's ears. To avoid executing Yashaharu, she decided to make an unexpected decision, promoting him to a general. But before bestowing that honor upon him, she set him a challenge. Yashaharu had to gather a massive amount of rice in just 1 week. Fearless and determined, Yashaharu accepted the task and embarked on an adventure to find the necessary deals and businesses that would allow him to obtain the required money to buy the rice. Meanwhile, in the castle, Nobujatsu eagerly awaited Yashaharu's failure. Not only did he crave revenge, but he also hoped that his sister would refuse to execute him, giving him the perfect excuse to start a rebellion against her. Days passed swiftly, and against all odds, Yashaharu managed to raise the necessary money within the allotted time. However, in his eagerness to fulfill the mission, he forgot to buy the precious rice. Faced with this situation, he decided to send Tashi in search of the rice while he hurried to meet Nobuna and deliver the news of his mission's success. In Nobuna's chamber, they began to talk about continents and the vast world surrounding them. As they waited for the arrival of the rice, the atmosphere filled with anticipation and excitement. Night fell, and due to the delay in rice delivery, Nobuna made the decision to proceed with her promise and begin the execution. Although she struggled with her own feelings, she unsheathed her sword and prepared to use it against Yashaharu. However, at that precise moment, vehicles arrived loaded with rice. Surprisingly, Yashaharu had obtained twice the required amount. Nobuna decided to spare his life, relieved that she didn't have to harm Yashaharu as her feelings for him were starting to blossom. However, the joy didn't last long because despite Yashaharu succeeding in his mission, Nobuna's brother, Nobujatsu, rebelled against her. Swiftly, Nobuna and her army marched towards Nobujatsu's territory, surprising his troops and winning the battle. After capturing Nobujatsu, Nobuna prepared to end his life as punishment. However, Yashaharu intervened and convinced Nobuna not to do it. He warned her that if she killed him, her heart would fall into deep darkness and she would become an evil person. Moved by Yashaharu's words, Nobuna decided to spare her brother's life. In a gesture of gratitude, Nobujatsu decided to join his sister, changing his name to renounce any claim to the throne. As night fell, Nobuna and Yashaharu shared an intimate moment on the balcony. Yashaharu made a pledge of loyalty and kissed her hand, sealing their eternal commitment. In the chaotic lands of Mino, the conflict divides the factions, as Seidu Daosen's son has rebelled against his own father to prevent the land from falling into the hands of Oda Nobuna. Worried about the situation, Nobuna gathers her council to evaluate the possibility of sending troops for assistance. However, in the face of Seidu's refusal to be saved, Nobuna decides not to intervene, causing anguish in her heart. Yashaharu, attempting to interrupt her, finds Nobuna in tears in her room. Amidst this challenge, 3 attractive individuals arrive in the village with the intention of negotiating and manipulating Nobuna. Yashaharu enters the young leader's room and engages in a dialogue with her about her feelings, as Nobuna feels that anyone she loves ends up losing their life. Suddenly, they hear a mysterious noise and go outside to investigate. The 3 individuals who have invaded the village appear. One of them, called Asai Nagamasa, the leader of the Asai clan, approaches Nobuna to initiate a conversation. He proposes marriage to her in exchange for his help in saving Seidu and conquering all of Japan together. Nobuna and Yashaharu are indignant at this proposal. Nagamasa leaves, leaving Nobuna lost in her thoughts. As night falls, after deliberating on whether to accept Nagamasa's marriage proposal or not, Yashaharu decides to confront him, as he considers it immoral to marry someone he does not love. In their interaction, Nagamasa explains that it is a political matter and that, although Yashaharu deeply loves Nobuna, they can never marry due to their difference in status. As dusk arrives, both Nobuna and Yashaharu observe each other from a distance, gazing at the stars and reflecting on the path to follow. The next day, Nobuna meets with Asai Nagamasa once again to communicate her decision. To her surprise, her council, including Yashaharu, rises in opposition to the marriage, thereby expelling Nagamasa from the place. At that moment, a messenger from Mino arrives along with Seidu Daosen's daughter, carrying a letter in which Seidu bids farewell to Nobuna, assuming he will not survive the inevitable battle. Desperate, Nobuna is about to send her army to Mino to rescue Seidu when she is restrained by Katsui. In that moment, Yashaharu offers to go in her place, accompanied by a small group of mercenaries. Upon arriving in Mino, they find Seidu and Yashaharu pleads with him to return with him, arguing that if he dies, Nobuna will be deeply saddened and he does not want to see her in that state. Finally, he manages to convince him, and together they escape from the battlefield. However, in their escape, they are pursued by Seidu's son's men. Upon reaching the bank of a river, they are surprised by Nobuna's army, who, upon learning of Yashaharu's presence, had decided to come to his aid. Amidst the conversation between Nobuna and Yashaharu, news reaches Nobuna that during their absence, 25,000 troops from Imagawa have invaded Ori. The landscape was grim, Ori had fallen, and Oda, the land of the fearless Nobuna, was in danger. The vulnerability of their army against the enemy's numerical superiority seemed to lead to surrender. However, Yashaharu refused to accept defeat. With determination, he approached Nobuna to change her mind. But she, determined to avoid the passed away of her soldiers, dismissed him brusquely. She blamed him for acting without her permission, for risking himself in Mino without considering her feelings. A slap sealed his dismissal, and Nobuna walked away with firm steps. Nobuna's home fell into a silence filled with uncertainty. Yashaharu questioned his worth as a collaborator. Was he truly helping Nobuna or just distracting her? At that moment, Seidu, his loyal ally, appeared to open his eyes. He reminded him that without his intervention, Nobuna wouldn't be alive. Inspired by these words, Yashaharu made a decision. He would embark on a journey to Imagawa Yashimoto's camp. Accompanied by Tashi, Hachisuka, and a loyal group of brave men, Yashaharu set off for his destination. On their way, they encountered an old acquaintance, Nobujatsu, now called Nobukatsu. He and his entourage of women joined the cause, ready to fight for a common purpose. Meanwhile, in the enemy camp, Imagawa Yashimoto relied on his Machiavellian plan to become the ruler of all Japan. In a conversation with Hanzo, he revealed the details of his strategy and how he expected to achieve victory. Finally, Yashaharu and his group reached the enemy camp. Full of courage, he decided to return to inform Nobuna about their location and plan an attack strategy. However, their bravery was surprisingly challenged. Hanzo and a group of ninjas attacked them, putting their lives in danger. In that critical moment, Yashaharu's companions made a bold decision. They chose to stay behind and confront the ninjas, allowing Yashaharu to escape. Running for his life, Yashaharu becomes entangled in a relentless pursuit by Hanzo. The cunning ninja quickly corners him and manages to injure him, leaving him with no options. However, Yashaharu decides to use his wit and proposes a daring negotiation to Hanzo. He offers him freedom in exchange for persuading Nobuna to defeat Imagawa Yashimoto. Surprisingly, Hanzo agrees to his request and lets him go. Yashaharu runs at full speed to the brave leader's room, where he reveals the exact location of the enemy camp. Nobuna, excited and confident of her victory, fills with euphoria and leads her army toward the camp. Once there, Nobuna's soldiers sweep away any enemy in their path. The fierce Katsui manages to approach Yashimoto with the intention of eliminating her, but Yashaharu intervenes at the last moment. He convinces Katsui to spare Yashimoto's life, and they ultimately decide to surrender voluntarily. After this breathtaking victory, a cry of joy emerges from the throats of Nobuna and her army, rising to the beautiful sky. Euphoria and jubilation grip everyone as they celebrate their epic triumph. On a sunny day of celebration, the great leader Nobuna was enjoying a cheerful picnic with her council. As they talked about their latest victories and the opinions of the allied troops, Yashaharu surprised everyone by offering Nobuna the reward of the most beautiful woman in the kingdom for her valuable assistance in the invasion of the enemy camp. Tension took hold of the group as they awaited Nobuna's response. However, the festive atmosphere was interrupted when Oda's troops entered a dense, fog-filled place. Despite their efforts, they seemed to be trapped in an endless maze. It was Yashaharu who noticed the trap, understanding that they were being manipulated by the brilliant strategist from Mino. Together, they managed to find the way out and continued their march towards glory. But as they persevered in their journey towards conquest, the battles became increasingly difficult, and Oda seemed unable to advance. In a frustrating council, Nobuna expressed her confusion about the situation. It was then that Seidu and Yashaharu revealed the existence of a genius strategist allied with Mino, Takenaka Hanbei. Without wasting time, Yashaharu set off on a mission to find and convince Takenaka Hanbei to join Oda's cause. Accompanied by Mitsuhide, Seidu's loyal assistant, they arrived in the territory of Mino, where they encountered Asai Nagamasa, who was also seeking Takenaka's alliance for his own marital interests with Nobuna. In Takenaka Hanbei's home, the mysterious strategist made an appearance and posed an unexpected challenge. They were invited to participate in a snack competition, where only one would be correct, and the one who found it would earn the right to have Takenaka Hanbei on their side. However, they were unaware that Takenaka had planned a cruel joke. None of the snacks was the correct one. Tension and disbelief filled the air. To everyone's surprise, Takenaka transformed into a ferocious wolf, challenging Hachisuka to a fierce battle. Despite the enemy's ferocity, Hachisuka managed to defeat them with bravery and determination. Yashaharu and Asai noticed someone behind a door. Opening it, they were surprised to discover that the real Takenaka Hanbei was actually a prodigious young girl. Using double summons, this brave little girl concealed her true identity and acted on her behalf. In Yashitatsu's majestic hall, Seidu's son, tension grew. This ruthless lord sent his men to find Takenaka Hanbei under the threat of using cruel methods. Faced with this dilemma, Yashaharu decided to confront Yashitatsu directly and seek negotiations. Facing each other in the hall, Yashitatsu couldn't fully comprehend Takenaka's hidden power and decided to eliminate her as an obstacle. However, his plan was soon disrupted when Yashaharu and Asai revealed their presence. Immediately, Yashitatsu ordered his soldiers to finish them off. Taking Takenaka in his arms, Yashitatsu underestimated her abilities and soon realized his mistake. The young girl cast summoning spells, defeating everyone in the hall. Takenaka's fierceness and determination left everyone astounded. After the fierce fight ended, Yashaharu took Takenaka and brought her to a peaceful nearby lake. They sat together, and as a show of gratitude for saving her and appreciating her unique personality, Takenaka decided to serve Yashaharu as his loyal servant. In the midst of the strategic battle for control of Tsunemata, a vital point for victory in the battle between the realms of Nobuna and Yoshitatsu, leader Oda Nobuna makes a crucial decision. She sends Katsui with a small army to confront Yoshitatsu's forces and take the strategic territory. However, Yoshiharu, eager to participate in the battle, is rejected by Nobuna. Despite his desire to fight alongside her, he trusts in Katsui's ability and her troops to accomplish the mission. Yoshitatsu's spies report on the advance of Oda's troops towards Tsunemata, alerting the enemy leader. He prepares his men to receive their adversaries and protect their territory tooth and nail. The clash ensues and the troops led by Katsui suffer an overwhelming defeat. Forced to retreat, they are overpowered by enemy forces. The situation seems hopeless. However, Asai, a strategist loyal to Nobuna, devises a bold plan to seize control of Tsunemata on his own. His goal is not only to achieve victory, but also to win Nobuna's hand and become her husband. Yoshiharu encounters Nobuna and presents the master plan to capture Tsunemata. After a lengthy conversation, Nobuna agrees to implement the plan proposed by Yoshiharu. The leader departs with her troops to another battlefront, creating a distraction for Yoshitatsu's army and making them neglect Tsunemata. Meanwhile, Yoshiharu and a select group of soldiers rush to construct a stronghold in the fall of night to confront Yoshitatsu's troops. To everyone's surprise, Yoshitatsu had a secret plan up his sleeve to eliminate Nobuna and her people. However, the brave warriors of Oda are not intimidated and fight with all their might. Meanwhile, the stronghold in Tsunemata quickly takes shape, thanks to the tireless efforts of the group led by Yoshiharu. Every stone and barricade are placed with precision, preparing for the final showdown. Elsewhere, Nobuna prepares for the confrontation with a portion of Yoshitatsu's forces. The battle rages fiercely, with bravery and determination from both sides. In the midst of the chaos of battle, Nobuna and her men valiantly engage in combat, unaware that it was all a clever trap orchestrated by Yoshitatsu. As swords clash and confusion ensues, Nobuna comprehends her enemy's twisted strategy. Yoshitatsu's plan was devastating, to set the battlefield on fire and annihilate both enemy and his own troops. But Nobuna, with her acute tactical vision, finds an escape route and manages to flee with her loyal men, heading towards Tsunemata. Meanwhile, in Tsunemata, Yoshiharu and his companions find themselves in a desperate situation, being overwhelmed by enemy forces. The stronghold they had built with so much effort is nearly destroyed. Most of their troops have fallen, and at a critical moment, Hachisuka bravely interposes to save Yoshiharu from a mortal attack. When all hope seems to fade, the savior of Tsunemata appears, Nobuna Oda, with her valiant men arriving to end the battle. Furthermore, the troops who were betrayed by Yoshitatsu join Oda's army and fight against Yoshitatsu's men. Meanwhile, leader Asai and his troops are intercepted by a group of soldiers sent by Nobuna to guard the forest, preventing them from intervening in the Battle of Tsunemata. Finally, Oda and her men achieve victory in the mad battle and conquer Mino, renaming Yoshitatsu's castle to Jifu Castle. In the council, a debate ensues on what to do with Yoshitatsu, and to everyone's surprise, Nobuna decides to spare his life, despite Sato, Yoshitatsu's father, opposing it. The young man is released and exits the chamber. Under the shimmering stars in the night sky, Yoshiharu moves to the balcony and engages in a conversation with Sato. With his words filled with wisdom, he manages to convince him that he now has a new opportunity to reconcile with his son. In a possible future, Japan was immersed in darkness and evil, with great empires engulfed in flames. The Rengoku era seemed to be coming to an end, but there was still hope amidst the despair. Nobuna, a courageous leader, was in a strategic meeting with her council. Their goal was to reach the capital and defeat the forces of evil. During the meeting, a clever idea emerged to use Imagawa Yashimoto, a prisoner of great importance due to the renown of her clan in that area. She would be key to their plans. At that moment, Asai, a persistent suitor, burst into Nobuna's chamber to propose marriage once again. However, Nobuna firmly rejected his advances. Frustrated, she decided to offer her sister's hand in marriage instead of hers. However, in an act of deception, Nobuna disguised her brother as a woman and Asai happily departed to his lands, unaware of the deceit. Later, Yoshiharu, a companion and follower of Nobuna, claimed his reward for having obtained the most beautiful woman in the kingdom. Nobuna, accepting his request, instructed him to wait in her room at night. With great anticipation, Yoshiharu prepared to receive the woman of his dreams. However, once again he was deceived by Nobuna, as instead of sending him a woman, she sent a young girl to his room. Meanwhile, Nobuna's army marched towards Kaio, facing and achieving victories in every battle. Upon reaching the city, Yoshiharu and his company encountered a desolate scene, filled with crime and desperation. Amidst that sadness, Yoshiharu witnessed criminals taking a young girl away. With the intervention of Tashi and his group, they managed to defeat the criminals and rescue the little girl. Surprisingly, it turned out to be Himiko, the head of the Yamato court and the most important person in Kaiō. Meanwhile, in a grand hall filled with influential figures in Japan, a secret meeting was taking place. Among them were Kano Sakihisa, a powerful man in the police and nobility, Suda Saokyu, a cunning merchant, Shokaku Gausei, the master temple in the mountain, and Matsunaga Danjo Hisahide, known as the Witch of the Rengoku era, a dangerous and powerful woman. These personalities gathered to discuss the fate of the capital and the power of the Yamato dynasty. Each had their own intentions and strategies to achieve it, with Himiko as the central figure. The discussions were heated, with each defending their interests passionately. Meanwhile, the brave leader Nobuna was busy planning her next strategic move, aware of the challenges that lay ahead. On the other hand, Yashaharu was present at the funeral in Kaiō, paying tribute to those fallen in battle. Suddenly, amidst the funeral, a group of thieves attacked two foreign girls. One of them was a Portuguese nun named Louise Frois, and the other was her young bodyguard, Bantanmaru. In an unexpected turn of events, Tashi intervened and helped the girls fend off their attackers. It turned out that Louise and Bantanmaru were missionaries who had arrived from Europe with the noble goal of fostering unity among nations and creating a more connected world. While Nobuna planned for a peaceful conquest, the powerful men in the capital schemed for a violent conquest, with plans to attack Nobuna's troops. The mastermind behind these plans was Asakura Yashikage, a marquis from an influential Japanese family. Additionally, during the meeting, Yashikage also revealed the presence of Yashitatsu, consumed by a desire for revenge against Nobuna Oda. In another corner of the city, Yashaharu walked alongside Himiko and Tashi when suddenly they were surprised by the unusual spectacle of bright butterflies emerging from the ground. This apparent magic was the work of Danjo Hisahide, who had used a spell to attack Yashaharu and thus blackmail Himiko into joining her cause and used the power of her name for her own benefit. Disoriented and unaware of what had struck them, Yashaharu and Tashi got up from the ground, confused by the strange events. However, they were still unaware of the future that awaited Himiko, bidding her farewell without knowing the challenges she would face. Meanwhile, the intrepid Nobuna and her army managed to reach the capital and take the city, turning Kaiō into the property of the Oda clan. The victory was a significant achievement for Nobuna and her fight for a fair and more equitable world. As the day drew to a close, Yashaharu and Nobuna stood on a balcony and discussed their longing to build a better world. Inspired by their shared vision, they reflected on the importance of joining forces and working together to achieve a brighter future. Nobuna, the brave and ambitious leader, received disheartening news. In order to use Imagawa Yashimoto in her negotiations with the most powerful families in Japan, she had to pay an exorbitant amount of money. Determined to obtain the power she longed for, Nobuna decided, along with Yashaharu, to seek solutions to her problem. They both made the decision to go to the market in search of an alternative that would allow them to gather the necessary funds. Their journey led them to the bustling city of Sakai, a place under the control of traders and merchants. One of the leaders of this group was Imai Saokyu. With hope in their hearts, Nobuna and Yashaharu met with the merchant to present their difficult situation. Imai Saokyu let them know that he couldn't cover the hefty sum required, but he had a brilliant idea. He proposed convening a meeting among the city's merchants, so that each would contribute a small amount of money. By adding up all these contributions, they would reach the necessary amount. While Nobuna and Yashaharu tried to find a solution in the city's business center, on the outskirts, Katsui and his brave troops faced off against the forces of Danjo Hisahide. Amidst the battle stood a powerful warrior, whose resemblance to Seidu's son was undeniable. At a crucial moment in the plot, Jubei, a devoted and passionate servant of Nobuna, rushed to the lake bridge where Nobuna and Yashaharu were. Full of adrenaline, she informed the leader about the fierce battle Katsui was waging against Hisahide's forces. The urgency of the situation convinced Nobuna that they needed to act immediately if they wanted to succeed in this conflict. Jubei, being a fervent follower of Nobuna, was completely dedicated to impressing and serving her. For her, the young leader was the only person in the world who understood her and with whom she truly identified. Her loyalty to Nobuna was unwavering, and she was willing to do whatever it took to help her in her quest for power. The long-awaited day arrived, the moment of the meeting with the merchants. Imai Saokyu sat beside Nobuna, ready to begin the negotiations. One of the merchants, Suda Han, surprised everyone by offering to buy all the required shares. Nobuna accepted the offer, and to show her gratitude, she decided to offer Suda Han a rich dish prepared by Yashaharu. However, Jubei also offered to cook, and a debate began about who was more capable of making the dish. Suda Han saw this situation as a perfect opportunity and decided to open a bet with Imai Saokyu. The bet consisted of each choosing their favorite cook, and their dishes would be put to a vote. While everyone prepared for the culinary contest, Yashaharu decided to visit the Portuguese nun to talk about the future and his thoughts on life. During the meal, an idea came to his mind to prepare mayonnaise for the final competition. Meanwhile, Katsui's troops managed to overcome the enemy attack and headed towards where the cooking contest was taking place. The next day, the food battle began. Yashaharu had some initial difficulties, but eventually managed to make a successful mayonnaise that conquered the judges' taste buds. However, to everyone's surprise, the victory was awarded to Jubei, leaving Yashaharu's friends indignant and considering the victory unfair. Nobuna, with a disappointed expression on her face, bid farewell to Jubei while her followers expressed their discontent. Yashaharu, frustrated, didn't even speak to her, emotionally shutting himself off. The sunset turned rainy, and in an unknown location, the most important personalities in Japan gathered to find ways to manipulate the Oda clan through Imagawa Yashimoto. The political future was tainted with shadows and conspiracies. It was a rainy and gloomy afternoon when Nobuna, the indomitable leader of the Oda clan, was gathered with her council. Once again, they were passionately debating the situation of conquest and the obstacles that stood in their way. Desperate to find a solution, Nobuna decided to take a bold step. From now on, they would use Imagawa Yashimoto as their false representative, a stratagem to confuse the enemies and maintain control in their hands. It was a risk, but also an opportunity to gain the upper hand in this challenging game of power. Meanwhile, Jubei, the brave warrior, was meeting with Amai Saokyu, who revealed the true reason behind Nobuna's disappointment. It turned out that Jubei had tried to defeat and humiliate Yashaharu, a valuable ally of Nobuna. This had angered their leader, as she considered all her generals and subjects as a family and didn't want to witness internal fights that would divide their clan. Elsewhere, Seidu and Nobuna received terrible news. Two of their most formidable enemies had joined forces and were heading towards their lands to attack them. It was a devastating threat that required a fast and effective response. Nobuna made a brave and risky decision. She decided to leave the capital and head to their lands to aid in the defense. She knew that if the enemies reached the capital first, their Ori and Mino lands would be destroyed in the process. The protection of her people became an unwavering priority. Meanwhile, Yashaharu, the man who had time traveled and whose actions were altering the course of history, was distressed. He realized that his decisions and actions had changed the course of events. He saved the life of Seidu, and more recently, that of Imagawa Yashimoto. These actions had triggered a chain of events that wouldn't have happened in the history Yashaharu knew. Frustration and regret overwhelmed Yashaharu. However, Nobuna, infuriated by his words, pushed him out of her sight and continued resolutely with her order to leave the capital. Nobuna's determination was relentless, and she would not allow any obstacle, not even the confusing circumstances caused by the time traveler, to stop her. The main force of the Oda clan began to retreat along the eastern sea route, led by the brave warriors Katsui and Nagahai. Only Imagawa Yashimoto and a small group of soldiers remained in Kaio, the abandoned capital. Meanwhile, in the shadows, a group of conspirators learned about the Oda troops' withdrawal from the capital. Without wasting time, they began planning the assault on the capital by Danjo, a mysterious and dangerous figure who promised to end Nobuna's reign. Yashaharu, walking alone and lost in his thoughts after his conversation with Nobuna, is suddenly attacked by a gigantic man who mercilessly knocks him unconscious. Meanwhile, Nobuna meets with Jubei and entrusts the protection of Imagawa Yashimoto and Yashaharu with her life. However, as she exits the castle, she receives the terrible news that Yashaharu has been kidnapped. When Yashaharu wakes up, he finds himself tied to a tree, and a man armed with a rifle reveals that he was only brought as bait to lure Oda Nobuna, as his goal is to end her life. Meanwhile, the troops led by Katsui realize that they have fallen into a trap, as the lands of Mino are not under attack. It was all a distraction tactic to draw the troops away from the capital and attack it more easily. The capital, valiantly defended by Jubei, is besieged from multiple fronts. Danjo appears on the balcony where Jubei is, and they engage in a fierce battle. Meanwhile, Nobuna rides towards Yashaharu's location unaware that a sniper is awaiting to attack her, while Yashaharu watches helplessly. Returning to the confrontation between Danjo and Jubei, Danjo attempts to use her butterfly technique to put Jubei to sleep, but Jubei manages to resist. Danjo reveals that a sniper was hired to eliminate Nobuna's life, and Jubei falls despairingly to the ground. Just when all seems lost, Nobuna appears and shoots at the ground, proving that she is still alive and more determined than ever. It turns out that Yashaharu managed to distract the sniper for a brief moment while using the last of his phone's battery. That small distraction is what saved the life of Oda Nobuna. In that crucial moment, Danjo tries to attack Jubei, but Yashaharu saves her just in time. Danjo's troops arrived to surround Nobuna's allies, but Danjo had not anticipated the presence of foreign troops led by the Portuguese nun. These forces surround Danjo's soldiers, forcing her to surrender. After all the conflict, Imagawa Yoshimoto obtains the position that had been planned, and Nobuna's plan is successful. Finally, Nobuna reunites with Himiko, who receives her blessing and approval to become the ruler of the country. Himiko praises Nobuna's kindness and strength, but also takes into account Yoshiharu, whom she considers a transparent person with good intentions and an important companion in this struggle. In a council chamber, Yoshiharu, Nobuna, and the other members discuss the need to obtain recognition from the remaining families for Nobuna to be accepted as governor. Determined to persuade these reluctant lands, they decide to organize a diplomatic visit but warn that if they refuse, they will resort to more drastic measures. However, Yoshiharu has a special request to prevent Nobuna from going to Echizen and instead attack Wakasa. Before the departure, Jubei hands Yoshiharu a talisman to protect him while he stays behind to guard the capital. Meanwhile, in the lands of the Asai clan, it is revealed that Asai Nagamasa, a prominent figure in the family, is actually a woman and not the man everyone believed. Nobuna leads her troops on their way to a new conquest, passing through the lands of the Asai. However, Hanbei, Nobuna's strategist, falls ill due to the fever caused by her excessive use of powers in previous days. While Nobuna plans to attack Echizen instead of Wakasa, Hanbei warns Yoshiharu about the imminent betrayal of the Asai, who want to make Asai Nagamasa the supreme ruler of Japan. Upon learning this, Yoshiharu sets out to find Nobuna and meets her younger brother, who gives him an enchanted artifact with a magical wolf. He pleads with Yoshiharu to save his sister, assuring him that he can handle it alone. Finally, Yoshiharu finds Nobuna and informs her about the Asai's betrayal. Aware of their disadvantage, they begin to search for a strategy. With not enough men to confront the Asai army on their own lands, Nobuna faces the difficult decision of asking one of her generals to stay behind to distract the enemy while everyone else escapes. Yoshiharu volunteers for this mission and is willing to sacrifice himself for the others. Accompanied by a group of brave soldiers, Yoshiharu temporarily holds off the Asai troops, buying time for Nobuna and her followers to escape towards Kaio. Katsui, another loyal general to Nobuna, decides to bring his own troops to facilitate the princess's escape, while Danjo, with her teleportation powers, heads to the enemy camp to try to persuade one of the soldiers to join their side. As Nobuna rides towards Kaio, she remembers the promise Yoshiharu made to always keep his promises. Filled with determination, she trusts that she will arrive home safe and sound. However, fate unexpectedly intervenes when she is hit by a bullet and falls to the ground. Yoshiharu continued to lead his men with courage and determination. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned by Asai's army, he never lost hope and encouraged his soldiers to fight with all their hearts, convincing them that they still had a chance to emerge victorious. In the midst of the battle, when Yoshiharu's forces began to falter, Yoshitatsu, Seidu's son, emerged from the forest with the intention of eliminating him. However, one of Yoshiharu's men bravely intervened, sacrificing himself for his leader and giving him enough time to escape. As Yoshiharu retreated, he realized that the number of men he had left was considerably smaller than at the start of the battle. Many of his loyal soldiers had given their lives in the fight. The determined soldiers of Asai, eager to find and eliminate Yoshiharu, charged against the increasingly depleted army. Threatening arrows approached Yoshiharu, but once again, one of his brave men protected him from danger. At that moment, Hanzu and Hanbei's double arrived to urge Yoshiharu to escape, but right then, Yoshitatsu appeared with a giant weapon to wreak havoc. Meanwhile, Katsui was anguished, crying on the ground, as Princess Nobuna lay unconscious and in critical condition. Although she had survived thanks to the bullet that hit Yoshitatsu's phone, it was uncertain whether she could survive much longer. On the battlefield, Yoshiharu was face to face with Yoshitatsu, begging him to let his men retreat, as he was the primary target. Yoshitatsu prepared to attack, but at that precise moment, Hanzu appeared and seemingly ended Yoshitatsu's life, causing him to disappear after receiving a massive explosion to his face. Blinded by rage, Jubei decided to attack Yoshitatsu directly. However, Yoshitatsu managed to shoot him and sent him falling off a cliff. A day after the treacherous ambush, the Shadow Group celebrated the success of their plan, considering Princess Nobuna as a neutralized threat despite her still being alive. Asai's forces advanced towards Kaio, where Katsui's men guarded the city gates. However, Asai's army outnumbered them and held superior military power. Meanwhile, Princess Nobuna rested unconscious, and her council debated how to tell her about what happened with Yoshiharu. Danjo proposed using her magic to erase that memory from her mind, but everyone was aware that it was a dangerous spell that could cost the princess her life. At that moment, Nobuna had a dream in which she married Yoshiharu, and all her friends and acquaintances celebrated at the wedding. However, the dream turned dark, revealing Yashaharu's loss. This dream awakened her and brought her back to her senses. Determined to avenge the betrayal she suffered and to unify Japan once and for all, Princess Nobuna, filled with rage and thirst for revenge, headed to the battlefield with her troops to lead them against the Asai and avenge Yashaharu and Jubei. The leader of Asai, upon seeing the powerful approaching army, decided that the best option was to flee. Meanwhile, the Shadow Council sent a gift to Princess Nobuna, attempting to negotiate her surrender. Upon opening it, she discovered that it was the head of a monkey, a mockery reminiscent of the nickname given to Yashaharu. In an overwhelming outburst of anger, the fearless Nobuna charges towards the den of the Shadow Council. Meanwhile, her army strategically divides and attacks multiple fronts simultaneously in a desperate attempt to defeat the enemy. Meanwhile, Hanbei, who has regained consciousness after a long sleep, laments her absence during the tragic events. Hanbei cleverly deduces that Yashaharu is still alive, and that it was Hanzo who saved him while making everyone believe he had killed him. Elsewhere, we see Jubei climbing up a steep cliff, proving that she has also survived adversity. Finally, Jubei finds Yashaharu in a pitiful state and takes him to a cave to provide care. Noticing Yashaharu's low body temperature, Jubei removes her clothes and uses her own body heat to warm him and save his life. In another dramatic twist of events, Katsui is seen fighting against two powerful enemy warriors, while Princess Nobuna advances swiftly on her horse. However, her progress is interrupted when she is hit by a cannon and falls to the ground, unable to continue. Meanwhile, the evil plan of the sinister Kano Sakihisa of the Shadow Council is unfolding just as he had planned. The mountain is engulfed in flames, creating the chaos and destruction he desired. Amidst the chaos and fire, Nobuna finds herself surrounded by flames but remains steadfast in her determination to honor Yashaharu's memory and create a better world, free from atrocities. Fortunately, Katsui manages to defeat her two enemies and quickly heads towards the mountain to join the fight. Meanwhile, Nobuna finally reaches the temple where the Shadow Council gathers and is greeted by the masked Yashitatsu, who has been patiently waiting for her. In the midst of battle, Danjo and her allies arrive just in time to lend their support to Nobuna in defeating Yashitatsu. While Nobuna ventures into the temple to face Kano, Yashitatsu remains engaged in combat against Nobuna's valiant allies. In an epic clash, Nobuna comes face to face with Kano. They not only battle physically, but also clash in their ideals. Kano argues that only nobles can rule, while Nobuna defends the belief that justice, not lineage, enables one to govern. In a powerful exchange of attacks, Nobuna manages to severely wound Kano, who is ultimately crushed by a flaming pillar, a victim of his own attempt at destruction. With Kano defeated and the battle coming to an end, Nobuna feels overwhelmed and kneels on the ground, silently thanking Yashaharu for his unwavering support. In that unexpected and emotional moment, Yashaharu suddenly appears to save her. He runs towards Nobuna, and she, thrilled to see her beloved alive, runs into his arms as well. A passionate embrace takes place between them, reminding them of the promise of a kiss they made upon reuniting. Just at that moment, their friends arrive and watch them, expectant and excited to witness that long-awaited moment. But Nobuna, embarrassed by everyone's gaze, decides to punch Yashaharu instead of kissing him. Finally, back in the capital, the inhabitants welcome them with great joy and celebration. Cheers and jubilant chants fill the air as everyone rejoices for the triumphant return of their beloved rulers and the memorable victory they have achieved. Hit the like button and subscribe if you like it. Write in the comments the word Nobuna if you want more videos like this one.